Hello folks, Star Trek Picard Season 3 Episode 4 No-Win Scenario. Let's get to it. Straight in with an up this week is for the establishing story. 5 years ago, and it's set also on Frontier Day, or as close to as, which is nice thematically, also very handy for the set dresser when it comes to the posters for Frontier Day. Stick around for the citation observations, because I have some observations about the set dressing. We get a group of junior officers approach Jean-Luc while he's attempting to have his fish and chips for lunch, and they are asking him all questions about the time that this happened and the time that that happened, and it's a little bit of hero worship. What's a little bit funny is that this is at a time when Jean-Luc was a little bit anti-Starfleet. I like the fact that in this, so this is an up for the scene, that even though he is anti-Starfleet, remember this is before the interview about, the synth attack on Mars, that he's still, well, it's not the junior officer's fault, and he engages them. And we revisit this story a couple of times through the episode, which I quite like. You will remember last week that I ended on my Trellium down, the first Trellium down of the season, which was remove yourself from the bridge, you've just killed us all. Well, I am happy to come in with an up this week on how Riker and Picard interact with each other in the beginning here. So once we jump straight back to the present, Riker and Picard, it's initially a little bit strange. Riker comes in and says, I'm telling you this is a courtesy. They've just gone through, Riker's gone through the gamut with the crew on the bridge about what's working, or more specifically, what's not working. Comes in and basically says, this is the end. Go and spend some time with your son. He has completely cooled down. They are able to speak. Jean-Luc apologizes to him. And this is how old friends interact. You can fly off the handle and then 5 seconds later, sure, listen, there was never any fight, or, what's the point in keeping a fight going? And I enjoyed that, so I'm very happily upping that this week. Just quickly as well, one thing I really like is the interaction between acting Captain Riker and Commander 7 of 9. I think they make a really good team. When she is bringing the information to Riker that there is in fact a changeling on board this ship, I really like how, he jumps into plan by like, I'm going to keep you in an unofficial capacity. Let's not ring too many alarm bells. And yes, we get an up for unofficial 7. She goes from being first officer of the ship to, well, still first officer of the ship, but also sort of an incognito spy, if you like. And I am here for this. I really like it. And I'm also really here for her partner in crime, a certain Captain Liam Shaw. We were delighted last week that we weren't delighted that he got injured. So let me finish my point. We were delighted that when he got injured, he lived. Because we were worried for so long with all of the trailers that we saw Riker was in command and we saw Picard on the bridge of the ship and we didn't see an awful lot of Shaw. Oh no, he's going to be there long enough to turn the keys on the engine and then he's done. No, he is recouping in his quarters. He's there sharpening a knife, as you do. He's also wearing a foot brace, which we had a giggle about this because, back in TNG's days, it's like, oh no, I've shattered my arm. Blip, blip, blip. You're fine. Now, it's like, oh no, I've shattered my leg. Oh, never quite seen one like that before. It's fine. It just adds to the drama of the scene. And actually, I'm really here for it. One thing I'm not here for is the lighting this week while at Red Alert. I'm not going to lie to you. Yes, I have seen all of the discourse online about the ship's too dark and the ship's this, the ship's this, and I don't have a massive problem. Yes, I would prefer it to be brighter, but look, I don't have a massive problem with the fact that it's a darker ship than the TNG era, because Enterprise E was a little bit darker than TNG, and, so on and so on. But what I do have the fact is that this is less Red Alert and more Red Light District, which I thought was, it was both hilarious and just like, oh, does that really suit the scene? So we had a bit of a giggle, and I suppose, yeah, if I'm being fair as well, it reminds me of movies like Hunt for Red October, when it's very submarine war thing, but it just became quite distracting after a while. We get it. You're at Red Alert. Could you not take the power that you're using to light those lights and put it into, I don't know, the engines? Not the only show to ever be guilty of that, but it did stick out. In sickbay, we find out exactly what as the episode goes on, but up for the fact that straight away, Crusher's on it. She knows that there's a pattern to these impacts that are hitting the Titan. Last week, I sort of decried the fact that, you know, she was the head of Starfleet Medical for so long, and, you know, she's incredibly experienced at what she does. Pay attention. This week, I like straight away, while, you know, Dr. Oka is really, really busy. Like, I'm not begrudging that. But Crusher's like, there is a pattern to this. I'm going to track these. And obviously it pays off as the episode goes along. What we have is an ensemble working together. So that is definitely an up for me this week. I absolutely am upping the fact that a holodeck would be kept with a completely separate power supply so that, yes, it could be a place where during an emergency the crew can gather. So we had to think about this one, right? So in an episode that is so dominated by power issues, is there a need for a holodeck? I think the episode does justify keeping the holodeck online. It's close. It is close. There is a lot of crew that can't do their duties for whatever reason. Injury, either physical or emotional, you know, there's a reason. And so it makes perfect sense. Now, the framing of it is that it's 10 forward and we get, you know, a wonderful scene between Jean-Luc and Jack. But I really do like the fact that the holodeck does have its own independent systems, because I love that this is effectively, I guess, the Titan's life deck. Now, this is a new idea that's sort of been introduced, well, I guess this season, and I love it, that there would be a dedicated safety deck, or that's where the escape pods are. Again, completely understanding that, well, sometimes it's good to have safety pods all over the ship, because what happens if you're miles away from the life deck? I personally take life deck to mean it's a little bit more reinforced, maybe, you know, like a storm shelter. And I like that the holodeck is the Titans. There's no question. Bottle of Jameson, it's in the blood. I continue to be impressed by Ed Speleers this season. I really, really like him as Jack. The entire exchange between Jean-Luc and Jack, there is both that bravado that goes with, well, like, I'm not just going to be your son straight away, so you do get that from Jack, but also you don't get, or at least I don't feel that you get, a resentment. You know, they do address the fact, Jean-Luc asks, why didn't you want to know me? And he dodges the question, and we'll find out why later on. I thought it was very, very well handled. The whole scene is really an up from me, but if I was to pick one exchange that I'm really giving it up to, elephant in the room, the hair. And we get a vague age on Ed, which is about 23 or 24. Picard says, well, enjoy the hair while you can. I just really like them together. Outside the holodeck, you've got Seven's partner in crime, Shaw. So they're discussing changelings overall. Now, I have to give a little bit of a down to a continuity. So there was a couple of continuity slips in this episode. First of all, Ensign John Foster was on the door of the transporter ensign's room, whereas Ensign Eli Foster is on the pad that's handed to Shaw. So just after the opening crawl, Seven is seen in Foster's quarters, and there is quite a reveal of, you know, the lack of silhouette of the bucket that she then finds in the quarters, you know, barely 10 minutes later. I will be slightly more forgiving of that one. Yes, it's possible bucket could have got moved. That would involve the changeling going back to the quarters, then I suppose discovering that transporter chief had been discovered. So that, to me, it's a little bit of a continuity thing. Jumping forward just a little bit to the next conversation between Jean-Luc and Jack. Jean-Luc calls the planet Angelius 4, barely 2 minutes later calls it Argelius 4. A couple of continuity issues there. Yeah, I sound a bit nitpicky doing it. Before we get some other junior officers arrive in this life deck, you have Picard and Jack getting to know each other. We've discussed the hair, and then they talk about this adventure that saw Jack Crusher, the original, and Picard effectively borrowing a shuttle to bring them to Argelius 4. Basically, through misadventure, suddenly power's all gone. So they're going to limp back to the Stargazer. There was discussion over this. Down 10 f***ing grueling hours does stand out. Whereas when Shaw swears, fine. Riker, you know, you notice it a bit more. It's the fact that it stands out as much as it does. If you go back to season 1, you know, Admiral Clancy, the sheer f***ing hubris, that made sense in the context of the character. This one feels less so. So this is a down for me. Despite the story is good, and of course it sets up a little bit of what we get later on, does feel a little bit like we're going to use a dirty word here. As Shaw and Seven discuss changelings, we get what I love, absolutely love. We actually see Rene Auberjonois' Odo. Now, he's a picture on a pad, but it's just lovely to see him again. That is absolutely an up from me. Down, Odo's bucket was given to him by Dr. Maura Paul. It is a Bajoran bucket. Why then would a changeling have basically the same bucket many years later? Is this changeling also a protege, if you like, of Dr. Maura Paul? Leaving that there, where I have a lot of sympathy in the fact that it's established very early in season 1 of Deep Space Nine that Odo based his appearance on Dr. Maura Paul, the scientist who was working with him when he was first discovered, as played by James Sloyan. From season 3 of DS9 onwards, there is either the greatest honor ever or the greatest shame ever in that the founders all look like Odo, which means they all model themselves after Dr. Maura Paul. Okay, that's DS9's thing, that's not here. Here, you get, why is it effectively the same bucket? Now, you could expand that and go, why is there a bucket at all? Shaw explains that, you know, changelings have to revert to their gelatinous state every so often. We know it's about 18 hours. We discussed this a lot before recording. Should there be a bucket at all? I think for Easter eggs, love it, sure, but we know the founders don't use buckets like that, they just ooze. And we know Odo eventually oozed himself. He requested his own quarters, and there was lots of geometric shapes that he practiced with. Now, then we went, well, the easy argument is that, well, what happens, you know, if changeling is lying on the floor and someone walks into their quarters? I think if someone's going to walk into a changeling's quarters, whether there's a bucket or not is the least of their issues. For me, the bucket itself, it stuck out a bit too much. It was like, hey, do you remember the bucket? When we did, remembered it so much that it shouldn't have been there. No. Let's get rid of all that doom and gloom. Up. In the holodeck, Shaw hobbles in, plunks his cigar down in the ashtray, and he asks Jack, hey, did your old man ever tell you where we first met? We proceed to receive what I feel is the best story of Wolf 359 since Best of Both Worlds. What we get here is, I think, echoes of everything Sisko couldn't say to Picard in Emissary. Sisko and Picard were both serving Starfleet officers. Here, Shaw is relieved from duty, and also, as he says himself, high on pain meds, and Picard is a retired admiral. Sure, there's hair splitting going on, but it's just a little bit outside of the norm. What Todd Stashwick proceeds to do is deliver a fantastic monologue outlining his trauma during the Battle of Wolf 359. If you take this monologue and retroactively look back through the episodes, I personally feel so much more sympathy for this character. I'm not saying that I agree with him, that, you know, it's Jean-Luc who was responsible, because we understand the nature of assimilation. But I think when dealt with the face of your demons, logic goes out the window. We saw it a little bit with Sisko, and that was after there was at least an understanding of assimilation. How these things build up in survivors' minds over the course of time as well. Who is to say that their belief and their experiences don't mean anything or aren't truthful or aren't factual? It's no one's place to say that. We possibly feel rancor toward it because, well, we know Picard was forced to do those things against his will. We know Locutus is not Picard. We've spent an awful lot of time with Jean-Luc. I think Todd Stashwick, particularly here, delivers the performance of the episode. He is absolutely my Latinum Up of the week, and also delivers one of the best character moments that I've seen in Star Trek in a long time. Before they can really discuss anything, Crusher comes up and says, so there's contractions going on outside. Something's about to be born. It suddenly switches gears of an episode to go from, you know, we're doing our Mutara Nebula, best of both worlds, hiding from the enemy, to like, oh, hold on, we might have space babies. As Jack says it a few minutes later, we get a great scene in the observation lounge. Because remember, yes, we had a nicer scene between Riker and Picard earlier on. Still, you know, he's a bit like, we're all dead. The only thing different is that we've less time left. But I really like this scene of the observation lounge because you get echoes of those great scenes back in the Next Generation of people workshopping a problem. And you see Riker then working with the bridge crew as well. They're sounding out, bouncing ideas off each other. And between here, there, and everywhere, they come up with a plan. One of the plans is Shaw, who was an engineer aboard the USS Constance, a grease monkey, as he calls it, to work with Seven to jury-rig the nacelles to absorb the energy of these contraction waves, if you like, that are blasting out through the nebula. And I love it. It's because, again, in this episode that's about trauma and it's about being chased by the Shrike, but also, you still get sci-fi fun. Because that's what it is. That is Star Trek at its core. There's a little, there is of course something going on with the Shrike, but I'm actually going to cover that in Cetacean Observation. So just in case you thought I was forgetting that. Picard and Seven go to Shaw's quarters and Shaw opens the door and he's about to say something, but of course the first thing that Jean-Luc says is like, I know, I'm the last person you want to see, but you know, we need your help, even if you are a dipshit from Chicago. I know what I said earlier on about Picard swearing, but this actually works perfect for me. This is an up. I'm fickle, just go with it. Shaw, ever the grease monkey, is, long story short, is able to jury-rig the nacelles to open so that they can absorb the energy of these energy waves. Very well played. Himself and Seven, with Riker, of course off-screen, set up a lure for the changeling. Next thing, Sidney LaForge walks in, and you get another moment of, well, my dad is Geordi LaForge. So because it's a fake out, I have to say, I enjoyed shooting the trope of naming Geordi LaForge as her dad, and I do not hold Sidney in any way responsible for this one because it works perfectly in the context of the scene. How does Seven realize? Sidney calls her Commander Seven, not Commander Hansen. Up. Her name is Commander Seven. Show her some respect. The plan works. The Titan is getting out of the nebula. Next thing, you see the Shrike coming in, looking very, very nasty, and Riker, with an almost palpable sense of glee, tractor beams an asteroid and absolutely shoves it down the Shrike's face. I enjoyed that, I'm not gonna lie to you. They get out of there. The next thing, the Shrike is completely shutting down, and space babies! We go back to early days Star Trek. And I just, from an episode that was about so many things, to bring us to a scene like that, I loved it. Because it shows that even in the darkest situations, there is still something to root for. And I loved that. Also, included in that, Stephen Barton's score for this scene is just wonderful. I really hope it's on the soundtrack. If it is, I want it to be called To Seek Out New Life or Space Babies. One of the two. It cannot be anything else. Really, really love that. And I would be absolutely remiss if I do not give an up to the wonderful cameo by Marina Sirtis at the end of the episode. Deanna Troi and Riker, they finally speak in present day. There is something that we do want to address as well, that this raises a question of, it's neither a down nor an up, but when we met the Rikers in Nepenthe, They seem like the happiest family in the world. Obviously, they've been through horrible tragedy, but they seem incredibly well adjusted. Particularly, Kestra seemed very, very well adjusted. Then we hear about the fact that Riker's not said such lovely things in a long time. That he couldn't live with Deanna feeling everything while he felt nothing. And you kind of go, well, where did this come from? Chris had a very good theory that the lifting of the synth ban, the arrival of Soji into their lives, was probably very traumatic to know that a cure was out there. So actually, I think this discussion of feelings is since the events of Nepenthe and A in Arcadia Ego. And I think it really, really works. Now folks, do us a favour and join us at Citation Observations. The episode opens with a song by Slam Allen, which is Can't Break Away From That Girl. The gold Enterprise C sitting on the bar of 10 forward. We get a picture of Picard and Guinan in the Nexus. How did they get that picture? Down. Now we get posters for Frontier Day, and we get Season 1 era uniforms on these junior officers as well. There was a very clever little set change. This is set 5 years ago. There's a picture of Guinan on the wall. In episode 1, when Picard and Riker are sharing this booth, that same picture has Crusher in it. I think that's a really little nod to the fact that Guinan knew something was coming. And that's an up for me. We get a shout out to the Hirogen. We get another name drop of Admiral Janeway. Calto is in Foster's quarters. There's also TNG era pads. There is a great scene where Crusher's standing there in the sick bay and they wheel Foster's body out behind her and he's in a white body bag. If there isn't a blooper where he just sits up behind her a la Night Terrors, I don't know. I just don't know. We see the OG holodeck wall. There is on the wall, Ian, who has the Twitter handle The Rin of Andor, appears in this episode as an OG style Andorian. This was shared by Jorg Hillebrand, who actually helped to get this Easter egg in the episode. So, I mean, just gonna raise my hand if you're, look, anyone who needs to be set dressing or anything after that, please, I'm your man. That's totally cool. We get the neon symbol for Arcanus Larger, which actually, I believe we called out last season, but that is a complete copy and paste of Arcanus Larger neon symbol from Star Trek The Search for Spock when McCoy is looking for travel to the Genesis sector. Metalis 4 gets called out. Odo appears. Odo's bucket is on a pad. Vadik. So this is a really short story this week, but it's quite crucial. Vadik has Shinzon's knife. So this jackal knife, that's what it's called, is very, very distinctive in its design. Fans of Buffy and Angel out there, they'll know that it was used quite a bit by Faith in season 3. Hello, I was a massive Buffy fan. For me, please bear with me. It's so distinctive and so distinctively from Star Trek Nemesis, that's a down, because what's the point? However, I will retract that down if this ends up tying back into the later plot. Also, I'm calling this is either the Great Link or the Mini Link. I love the effect. That's an up from me in this scene. The Daystrom logo is emblazoned on the portal weapon as it's jettisoned from the Shrike. We get references to the children of Tama and the episode Darmok. Of course, Jack Crusher is dropped by name. No in scenario. You know I don't have any choice in the matter. That's a down. The medical rod of Asclepius is on the wall in sickbay. So Argelius 4 is the one called out in this episode, but Argelius 2 is the episode that features in Wolf in the Fold, the episode of the original series that effectively saw Jack the Ripper killing people in the time of Kirk and Scotty. They tried to pin the murders on Scotty. Yeah, it was a planet that was well known for its exotic dancers and ties in, I suppose, quite nicely with this story of Picard and Jack going to get laid. The OG Stargazer gets a shout out, of course, Wolf 359. Locutus's voice is heard in a voiceover in the background. There is a shout out to Girardi and that weird shit on the Stargazer when Captain Shaw is talking about the real Borg. The actual assumption of the power into the nacelles is very evocative of the episode Force of Nature and the Soliton Wave, which would have helped in terms of propulsion. Farpoint gets a shout out. The Tellarian Republic is shown on a map on the observation lounge. The whole situation of dodging the asteroids, very evocative, obviously, of that story between Jack and JL earlier, but also of the episode Booby Trap as well. There's definite James Horner in the air, in the music around this scene. The actual interface that Jack is looking at is very like the interface you see in various episodes of The Next Generation to seek out new life. And in that final scene, the one that shows Jack was there in 10 Forward, beside the gold Enterprise C, there's a gold NX-01, and then, I guess, sleeper agents for the end of the episode? We're willing to take your thoughts on what is going to go on with Jack in this season. That's everything for us, folks. Let us know what you thought in the comments below. Get in touch with us over on Twitter at TrekCulture or on Instagram at TrekCultureYT. Catch myself at Sean Ferrick and catch the wonderful Chris at EditChrisEdit on all of the various as well. You're awesome. Are you enjoying season 4 of Picard? Are you slightly horrified that next week we are halfway through? Let us know. I will talk to you soon. Make sure that you live long and prosper. Look after yourself. Remember, infinite diversity in infinite combinations. Have a wonderful weekend. Make it so.